All right, everyone. Testing 1, 2. Good morning. I think we're going to get started. And my name is Stephen Moore. I'm the Vice Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. First, I'd like to introduce my colleagues. And I'll say that our Chair, Felicia Marcus, is feeling under the weather today and may join us later if she is recovering. And with that, to my right is Board Member Tam Dodick, and to her right, Board Member Joaquin Esquivel. I'll also at this time ask our Acting Executive Officer, Jonathan Bishop, to introduce staff that are assisting the board.
Yes, well, to my left is Assistant Chief Counsel Phil Wiles. To my right is Chief Deputy Eric Oppenheimer, and assisting today is Courtney Tyner.
Great. Well, I hope everyone had a great 4th of July. And at this time, I'll go through the emergency evacuation procedure, just reminding you to identify the nearest exit to you in case you hear the sound, the emergency sound. You'll know it when you hear it. And we are required to leave the room immediately. And so gather up your valuables, use the stairs, exit the building, and we convene our group at 10th and J in Cesar Chavez Park. And you'll get to know the all clear if you hang out with us. Also want to remind everyone this meeting is webcasted and recorded, so please speak into the microphone when you come up. Make sure the green light is on. Don't speak too close because it pops and buzzes on the web and it's hard to understand you. And last but not least, please turn off all noise-making devices, cell phones, get it on the buzz setting and that sort of thing. And I think with that, we can get on to our agenda. So with that done, we're on to public forum. I have one speaker card. Any member of the public may address the board and ask questions of the board relating to any matter that's not on our agenda today. And with that, I would like to invite Libby Uramovic to give us a public forum address. Or is your microphone on? Look for the green.
Now you're on. Can you hear me? There we go. Libby Uramovic, Sacramento. On June 20th, the city of Beaumont submitted documents that were colluded with the State Water Board, forged EPA documents in order to defraud banking financial institutions. It has been reported to the SEC and the FDIC. It is illegal to submit forged documents to banking institutions to acquire money. It's a federal crime. It's illegal to forge government documents. Are you listening to me, Mr. Moore? It's illegal to destroy government documents, and it's illegal to use those forged government documents to try to defraud banking institutions. On June 22nd, Kyle Wazinski stood up at LAFCO and said he's very sure that the State Water Board is going to give them $108 million to build a state-of-the-art recycled water facility that they just built 10 years ago, that this state board swears is there. If it is there, why do these people need to build it again? See how that's a little bit of a problem? But he's absolutely sure that this state board is going to give them money, $108 million of taxpayer money to cover up the embezzlement that's been going on for 20 years. They're going to use forged documents to acquire bank loans and grants because they're not they can't get a bond on their own. The SEC has locked them out of the bond industry because they've defrauded public documents. Do you have ADD, Mr. Moore? I'm looking straight at you and you just seem to be looking everywhere but at me. Do you got a problem with looking at old women with high IQs? Do you got a problem with accountants? The city of Beaumont's insurance expired on July 1st. They were self-insured through ERMAC. ERMAC was owned by James Gregg, who was also drawing a salary from the city of Beaumont to be their risk manager. James Gregg has been removed from ERMAC, and Beaumont has been removed from ERMAC. The city of Beaumont has no city insurance. Do you know they tried 2 years ago to get other city insurance? You know what one of the first questions are? Do you got fire stations? The answer in Beaumont is no, they don't have fire stations. Do they have water? No. Do they have roads? No. They have $400 million in debt, $300 million bond debt, and they have nothing to show for it because they embezzled all the money. The only asset the city of Beaumont has is a $58 million sewer plant because they have $60 million in forged machinery and equipment on it. You get it, Mr. Moore? You got a bit of ADT. What's the point of looking like this? What does that do for you? Does that help you like dissuade things? Does that do the 1 year in and 1 year out thing for you? Do you think it's going to keep you out of federal prison? Nobody sends corrupt elected officials to prison anymore. Right, Mr. Moore? That's the second time you've laughed in my face, isn't it? I got a letter from the state attorney general saying that they are not going to take the case. And that means the feds have the right to step in, as they always have. So I don't think that little collusion's going to work for you. But that's okay. You keep it up. You're doing big things. Here, Princess, add this to your collection.
All right, that's quite an act you got there, Ms. Yaramovic. I like this. It changes every month, but at a certain point, you know, when we meet with staff. Yep.
Fraudulent document, collusion to defraud the citizens. It's the same story over and over and over. You're going to hear it every meeting until you're indicted.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Next, we'll consider the minutes from the June 20th, 2017 board meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
It seems so anticlimactic now to say, I move for adoption of the minutes.
Oh, were you not?
Maybe I should rant and rave about it some more.
I second.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the civility of the motion. With that, could I have a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion adopted. So at this time, the uncontested item calendar, and I don't see any cards for that, and board members don't need to bring it off of the uncontested calendar. So with that, this is the consideration of the resolution authorizing the executive director or designee to execute the 3-year interagency agreement with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to develop the sport fish consumption advisory for water bodies throughout the state for the next 3 fiscal years. Do I have a motion?
As always, I move it with great pride, and actually, in all seriousness, this is a very important function, so I appreciate the collaboration with the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment in order to do this work.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And yes, my thanks also to our sister agency here in Cal EPA. So let's keep the agenda moving along. At this time, we have the informational items. Item 3 will start, and we'll bring Mr. Bishop. Could you please introduce that? And I don't know if you want to. Are we going to combine 3 and 4 today, or?
I don't believe so. So
this is the current hydrologic conditions in the state of California. Thank you.
And staff will be giving our monthly update on current conditions.
Good morning, Vice Chair Moore and members of the board. My name is Connie Mitterhofer. I'm the Program Manager for the Special Projects and Hearings section in the Division of Water Rights. I'm here this morning to provide the hydrology update for the Bay Delta watershed, and with me this morning is Ken Emanuel to help me with any questions that you might have. Because CDAC, the website that we typically get our data from, has been down for the last week, we do not have a presentation for you today. But we're prepared to give you a verbal update. We expect that the 8-station index for the North Sierra continues to show the ongoing trend with the wettest year on record, with the San Joaquin and Tulare Basin also indicating a very wet year. So we don't expect to see any changes on that data. Almost all of the reservoirs are at or above historic average levels for this time of the year. Cachuma shows at 50%, and Diamond Valley Lake shows at 88%. So there were a couple of percent increases from that. And then McClure was showing up at 98%, so there was about a 7% increase. Drought conditions remain roughly the same as was reported 2 weeks ago, with some areas in the south still showing some drought conditions. Let's see, the snow water content indicates normal snow melt and higher than average snow water content, consistent with the rainfall. And then there's no concerns with temperature compliance issues.
Good. Any questions? Anything to add? Well, I appreciate the overview of the hydrologic conditions. They tend to be normal. We did hear of some levee management issues in the Delta about a week ago or so, but any insight into that in terms of the flows, and was it just a matter of keeping an eye on things?
I think that's the case, yes.
Yeah,
but we
because I
can
didn't
always
really
get
hear
back to you.
anything since that as far as any problems encountered. The system was holding. Okay, well, with that, we can move on to the next item, which is an update, item number 4, update on emergency water conservation regulation. Thank you, Ms. Mitterhofer. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's see. How do we bring up the presentation?
Courtney will do it for you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, just a minute, or
Okay.
half a minute. Yep, with this item, we're continuing to keep an eye on the level of conservation in the state of California now that the governor has declared the drought to be over, and to keep an eye on our water use, as we all know of its importance, especially during the dry season when outdoor use increases. And with that, Ms. Freevert.
Okay.
Thanks for the update.
I'm Kathy Freevert, Conservation Specialist with the Office of Research Planning and Performance. And as you just noted, we do a monthly update. And this will be the 36th month of that we've had in place mandatory reporting from our urban water suppliers. I am filling in for Yelena Hartman, who is unable to be here today, and she compiles the data for us. As mentioned, in April, the governor lifted the drought proclamation, and the State Water Board followed that with rescinding the regulation for mandatory conservation standards, but kept in place monthly reporting and a prohibition on the wasteful water practices. So those remain in place then until November 25th of this year. On this chart, you can see a comparison from the year 2013 and subsequent years. The line of interest is the orange line, which represents 2017. And in that, you'll see that the orange line is a little bit above where we were in 2016 for the month of May. To be more specific, it represents 162.3 billion gallons of water that was produced in May of 2017, and that's 10% more than in May of 2016. So we would expect some increase with the drought proclamation being lifted. And this represents a 20% water savings as compared to 2013. We did have 97% of suppliers reporting, so that's good participation. The savings amount to 40.6 billion gallons, and that's enough to provide water to 622,000 people for a whole year. And another way to think of that is it's equivalent to Lake Mendocino. We also do a comparison of the residential gallons per capita per day, and in May 2017 it was 96 across the state, which is 11% more than last year. And if you look at the 10 hydrologic regions, each of them show a slightly higher amount than last year, but a lower amount than our baseline year of 2013. And as for next steps, we continue to monitor and track the reports that we receive each month. We are following up with the non-reporters. We contact them and try to get the information. And staff are also working on a regulation package, rulemaking package for that would make monthly reporting permanent, along with the prohibitions on wasteful practices. So that's the update.
That's great. Do you all have any questions?
So what's the time frame for the permanent reporting and prohibitions?
The staff is working on the package, and when that is ready, we'll hopefully soon we'll be able to proceed with that. There's been some delay, but we're hoping that we'll be moving forward soon.
Soon is?
Yeah.
Month or two?
We were originally looking at getting a draft out in like the next month, but there's been some delays, so we're looking likely more like the fall time period. And because of that, there will be a gap in the period when the new regulations are made permanent and the existing prohibitions and reporting expire in November. So that's something that we're mindful of. But at this point, it is looking like, in full disclosure, that there will be a period of time where those won't be in place. Of course, we'll continue to collect reporting data on a voluntary basis, and then when the new regulations are put in place, we can go back and collect the data that we missed if there is non-reporting during that period.
It'll be interesting to see how many continue with voluntary reporting.
That will be, yeah.
Since we've heard it's not necessary to make it a requirement, so we'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'd like a report on that.
Yeah, how long a period do you anticipate? Will it be a month or two that the gap would exist? I know it's hard to necessarily tell specifically, but
Yeah, so I'm speculating a little, but I'd say educated guess is somewhere between 2 and 4 months.
it'll be very interesting to see who continues to report.
You know, one question I had on interpreting the data, it is remarkable that we're still 20% below baseline 4 years later. And you have the per capita data in there that's quite a bit lower than in 2013. Roughly, and if you don't have the answer, I understand, but in interpreting this data, it's important to remember what the population increase has been at the same time, because it has been 4 years. So I'm curious how many Californians have been added since 2013 that figure in, you know, so in other words, population's still gone up.
Right.
And yet
I don't know that number offhand, but generally it's 300 to 500,000 people per year, that statewide increase, but I don't know the exact numbers for the years.
Exactly. So, or, you know, roughly. Yeah. So that means that, you know, we're talking about over 1 million more people in the state, likely since baseline, and yet still 20% lower use in the month of May, at any rate. So, so keep on saving water, especially now that we're doing outdoor irrigation. And I think, I like to think that we've all learned a lot together about being more efficient in our outdoor landscaping throughout the state, and I think it's making a huge impact. So thanks. And with that, shall we continue on the agenda? I would like Mr. Bishop to introduce the next item, item number 5.
Yes, item number 5, the board will consider adopting a resolution for the Department of Drinking Water to revise the perchlorate regulations by lowering the detection limit for the purposes of reporting. Staff will discuss the complete review.
Okay, good morning, Vice Chair Moore, fellow board members. We're here to present on the perchlorate item this morning. Zach Grounds will be doing the presentation, so we'll run through the presentation and answer questions.
Hang on. There we go. We'll be presenting on the common sources of perchlorate, what the regulations require when the perchlorate MCL is exceeded, why we performed an MCL review for perchlorate, the current status of compliance, how the existing detection level for purposes of reporting impacts future perchlorate regulations, and the options and staff recommendation for moving forward on perchlorate. No, shoot. All right, so perchlorate and its salts are used in solid propellant for rockets, missiles, and fireworks. The manufacture and use of these products has resulted in releases of perchlorate into the environment. Perchlorate contamination has also resulted from the use of Chilean fertilizers that contain naturally occurring perchlorate. And similar to that fertilizer, some perchlorate in California is a result of naturally occurring deposits. Apologies. Existing regulations for perchlorate largely parallel regulations for other inorganic contaminants, but somewhat like nitrate, perchlorate is regulated as an acute toxin as a result of potential effects on developing young. Following a sample result above the MCL, a water system is required to perform confirmation sampling and possibly public notification or corrective action. An MCL violation results in a Tier 1 notification. Tier 1 notices are an expedited public health notification to the Division of Drinking Water and to the public. Tier 1 notices require the water system to perform notification within 24 hours of learning about the violation and require advanced notification methods such as radio or television messaging. The current MCL for perchlorate is 6 micrograms per liter, or 6 parts per billion. The MCL went into effect in October 2007 and hasn't changed since. In 2015, the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or WEHA, revised the public health goal, or PHG, from 6 micrograms per liter to 1 microgram per liter. The revision was a result of changing how the PHG was calculated. In 2004, the PHG for perchlorate was based on protection of pregnant women and fetuses. But in 2015, the PHG identified infants as the most vulnerable population due to naturally lower stores of thyroid hormone and increased water intake to body weight based on a formula diet. That revision of the PHG prompted the State Water Board to review and consider the perchlorate MCL in accordance with the Health and Safety Code as part of our routine review of MCLs. So drinking water treatment has been installed in about 190 wells operated by 57 water systems. The majority of the treatment installed is ion exchange, which is one of the best available technologies in regulation. A review of the monitoring results showed that treatment is extremely effective at removing perchlorate to less than the MCL and also removing perchlorate to less than the detection limit at 4 micrograms per liter in over 98% of the samples that we had in our database. So the current DLR of 4 micrograms per liter limits the ability of the Division of Drinking Water to detect and consider perchlorate in wells at concentrations closer to the public health goal of 1 microgram per liter. Sample results of less than 4 micrograms per liter are typically not measured using the current common analytical method, and if they are measured at a lower level, are usually only reported to the division as either non-detect or as less than 4 micrograms per liter. That barrier inhibits the division's ability to evaluate both the performance of existing treatment at lowering perchlorate below 4 micrograms per liter and the occurrence of perchlorate in wells that we currently assume do not have any perchlorate. That lack of data impacts the potential development of a revised sub-4 microgram MCL by sharply limiting the occurrence data and inhibiting our ability to determine economic and technological feasibility of a lower MCL. All right. So as a result of the review, the Regulatory Development Unit evaluated 2 options. First, revising both the detection limit and the MCL for perchlorate in one regulation package with the lowest possible MCL that we could move down to of 4 micrograms per liter. Or second, revising only the DLR at this time, collecting data from the monitoring that would follow, and then, if appropriate, developing a second regulation to lower the MCL, possibly less than 4 micrograms per liter and closer to the public health goal. And the division recommends the second option of revising only the detection limit at this time. The Regulatory Development Unit would continue to work toward lowering the DLR in a future regulation package. And we believe that a DLR of less than 4 micrograms per liter is both technologically feasible and should not have a significant economic impact. That new DLR would allow for the collection of occurrence data closer to, if not at, the public health goal. That data would then allow the Regulatory Development Unit to determine treatment efficiency, and if appropriate, how close to the public health goal a revised MCL could be set while remaining technologically and economically feasible. As a final item, in 2011, the EPA determined that perchlorate met the requirement for regulation under the Safe Drinking Water Act and began reviewing data, but at this time the potential date and the value for that future MCL are unknown. And that's all, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rounds. Do we have any questions from the board members? I'll hold any discussion myself, and we have 3 speakers that have submitted cards, so why don't we hear from the speakers. First, Jamie Miner from the San Diego County Water Authority. And after that, Adam Borchard from Aqua, and Jonathan Young from the California Municipal Utilities Association. Thank you, Ms. Miner.
Good morning. Jamie Miner from Nemo Pappas and Associates on behalf of the San Diego County Water Authority. So we would like to see the occurrence data from water agencies used to evaluate a lower MCL and have it come from monitoring already required following the revision of the DLR. If the intent is to increase the frequency of monitoring to evaluate a lower MCL, then this should be considered during the reg process to devise the DLR, which would provide for public input and evaluation of potential impacts of changing requirements, including on small water systems. So thanks for the opportunity to comment today, and we look forward to working with you on this item.
Thank you. And Mr. Borchard, welcome.
Similar comments to the previous speaker. Good morning, Vice Chair Moore and fellow board members. My name is Adam Borchard. I'm speaking on behalf of the Association of California Water Agencies. ACWA represents over 430 local water agencies across California that supply approximately 90% of the water delivered in California. Our members are entrusted with the responsibility of supplying the public with safe and reliable drinking water, ensuring the safety of drinking water supplies by complying with all state and federal standards is the highest priority of our members. ACWA and the California Municipal Utilities Association, CMUA, submitted written comments ahead of today's board meeting. Generally, ACWA and CMUA concur with the Division of Drinking Water that lowering the detection limit for purposes of reporting after the Office of Environmental Health Hazardous Assessment revised the public health goal for perchlorate is a reasonable step towards revising the perchlorate maximum contaminant level, and we agree with their second option to do 2 regulatory rounds. To reaffirm our letter, ACWA and CMUA have 2 suggestions moving forward. First, we believe that DDW should develop a standardized approach for establishing a DLR. This should take into account quantified levels of precision and accuracy. We think this would be helpful for perchlorate now and for future and for other contaminants with revised public health goals and DLRs in the future. And then second, DDW should define what the occurrence data sampling and collecting program will be. We would recommend that DDW should utilize routine monitoring data. However, if occurrence monitoring is increased to expedite data collection for a new DLR, then the program should be included as part of the regulations to be adopted for the revised DLR. We think this process would ensure appropriate, adequate vetting and public input. And we look forward to continue working with Division of Drinking Water staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Mr. Young from CMUA.
Good morning, board members and staff, and thank you for allowing me to comment today. My name is Jonathan Young, and I'm with the California Municipal Utilities Association, and our members represent about 70%, our suppliers about 70% of the water to Californians, and I just want to echo the sentiments that my colleagues at ACWA and the San Diego Water Authority have already spoken to, and in the interest of time, I'll say thank you for your time and consideration. We look forward to working with staff.
Well, thanks for those comments, and it does speak to some specificity as far as what comes next. Staff, would you like to respond in terms of the idea of the standardized approach and the definition of the level of effort for collection of data and how that fits into the proposed regulations?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So Darren Polheim is Deputy Director for Division of Drinking Water. So the question of the monitoring schedule and should we stick with the standard schedule or increase it will basically be brought back to the board as we present the DLR. Just as kind of a foreshadowing of that, I think we'll have more details obviously, but my understanding is that it's about a 3-year cycle to go through, so that if we were to just change to DLR, it would be approximately 3 years before everybody had gone through whatever their pertinent cycle was, and then you would have a full set of data sometime after that, and then of course add on to that some time for a regulatory package to follow. So you'll have to factor that in, and of course we'll present some options associated with that when we bring that back. And then the standardized approach for the DLR, certainly we'll get into that in more detail as to what we're looking at and proposing. There's some pretty standard approaches already that basically look at what the limits are and then put some safety factors in so that we can be sure that labs are giving us good data associated with that, and that'll be detailed as well when we present later.
Following up, would this be part of routine monitoring data collection, or is it a special study?
No, this would be part of routine monitoring, and that's what I think the commenters are suggesting, is that while we lower the DLR, keep them on their routine monitoring schedules associated with this, which would be the 3-year period.
Okay.
You know me well enough to know by now that I'm always uneasy about just saying go forth and do work without some sort of a time frame associated with it, or without some sort of a mechanism for reporting back to the board, and especially on something like this, without a better understanding of what the stakeholder engagement process is going to be. So, Mr. Bohemus, any additional details on all of that?
Yeah, sorry, I guess we should have put a time schedule in there. It's just kind of standard for us now, and so I'm not thinking past it, but in essence, we would do what we're doing with all of the MCL and Division of Drinking Water regulatory packages. So we will start with a series of public outreach meetings with some straw man proposals, shop that to see.
And when do you expect that to
happen
occur?
this fall.
This fall, okay.
Yes, right. So, and then this was kind of scheduled into, this is, I'm going to forget the exact number, but obviously it's in our priority list that we brought to the board regarding the regulatory packages, so it's in the priority list to work forward on. We don't see of it as a really complex change, since we're just changing the DLR. There will be some work associated with that, but you would see that we would go out in the fall with what our proposal is, and then probably be back in the spring or summer of next year with the regulatory package before the board and doing the formal APA process. And I'll get you a more detailed schedule.
So for the stakeholders who would like to engage, then their first opportunity would be in the fall?
Yes.
Any other questions? No? Well, I think with that concludes this item. Because, no, it's okay.
I think we actually have to do something.
Yeah, there is a resolution.
Oh, forgive me. Yep, so.
Yes, Chair Marcus, would you have the honor of moving the item?
I get so excited. Yes. Do I have a motion on the proposed resolution?
So moved. So second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. Yes, you're part of this too. Thanks, staff, and thanks to the folks, the speakers who came, and the comments you submitted on this process, and move forward with your recommendation. Thanks. And we can just continue to carry forward with the agenda, I believe. Is it okay if we don't take a break at this time? Yep. And with that, Mr. Bishop, can you introduce item number 6, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. While staff comes up, item number 6 is to incorporate TMDLs into our small MS4 permit, which is the permit for small systems and for, my mind just blanked on the name of it, but we'll get to it. Special districts. And so as you might all recall, or maybe don't recall, is that when we adopted the small MS4 update, we punted on including all the TMDLs and said that we would be bringing that back to you after we had an opportunity to meet with stakeholders and with the regional boards to develop the language for those TMDL requirements. This is a little bit delayed, but we are now bringing it forward to you, and this will be the first of another one coming later this year, early next year on the industrial permit, also incorporating it. And I will say that it is our intention never to do this again, and we will include TMDLs in the permits as they're adopted, as opposed to bringing them in at a later date. But at that time, it was there was a difficulty in making sure that the stakeholders had an opportunity to have input into the requirements on a statewide basis. And so that was the need for the delay. And I will turn it over to staff to go through the history.
I wouldn't call that technically a punt. It was a thoughtful response to the confusion expressed by our stakeholders. Now, there are times when we punt. That just doesn't happen to technically be a punt.
Thank you for that
I
correction.
just want to correct that for the record.
Yes.
Here, I second that correction.
Well, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. I hope you're feeling better. My name is Gayleen, and I'm the unit chief for the Municipal Stormwater Unit at the State Water Board, and I'm the statewide program manager. Today, the board is hosting a public hearing on the recently noticed proposed amendment to the statewide MS4 general permit. And the proposed amendment addresses implementation of 65 TMDLs in attachment G of that permit. These TMDLs are newly proposed, there are 9 TMDLs that are newly proposed inclusions into that permit. There's no board action today. The board hearing is within the 45-day public review period of the proposed amendment, and this board hearing allows interested parties to provide oral comments to you in addition to submitting their written comments prior to the close of the 45-day period, which is July 20th. Staff will act upon direction given by the board. To make sure everyone is on board with the basics of TMDL, this slide presents a short overview. The Clean Water Act contains a water quality-based approach strategy that relies on evaluating the conditions of the water bodies and setting limitations on the amount of the pollution that the water body can be exposed to without adversely affecting the beneficial uses. States are required to list water bodies that are impaired and to develop the TMDLs. The TMDL must account for all sources that caused or contributed to the water body's impairment. The TMDL may contain a numeric waste load allocation and have a final compliance due date. The TMDLs are region and watershed specific, so the regional boards adopted the TMDLs into their respective basin plans. TMDLs are implemented through MPDES permits, such as the small MS4 statewide general permit, or other regulatory permitting actions by the water boards. So the amendment to the statewide small MS4 general permit are proposed in the main body of the permit, in the TMDL section of the fact sheet, and also in attachment G, which is the region-specific requirements and implementations of the TMDLs. Note that the attachments to a permit are also enforceable. The proposed language to the body of the permit includes modifying TMDL finding number 40, modifying the TMDL monitoring provision in section E13 and the TMDL compliance requirement provision in section E15. Staff also proposes one non-TMDL related change within the permit, and it's regarding annual reporting. The permit currently requires permittees to submit their past year activities report, but doesn't specify when. So we're proposing to require a consistent submittal date of October 15th. Proposed modifications to the fact sheet of the permit provide the rationale for each set of the TMDL requirements listed in attachment G, and for naming the entity as a source that contributed to the impairment of the water body. Some TMDLs specified waste load allocations and final TMDL compliance deadlines that are proposed in the fact sheet. The fact sheet changes explain how the implementation of the permit requirements will attain the TMDL waste load allocation. The fact sheet amendment also addresses the unfunded mandate considerations. Attachment G proposed TMDL changes that are region specific, but in general, there are 41 newly named permittees. And as I said, there are 9 new TMDLs. Attachment G sets out a series of proposed revised or new implementation actions, and these implementation actions may contain development of a plan, reporting requirements, and sometimes interim due dates for the implementation actions. Other proposed changes in Attachment G also clarifies the regional board order and the date of that order that established the TMDL for easy reference, and references the waste load allocation and compliance due date that are proposed in the fact sheet. There are 15 permittees that will be newly responsible for complying with a set of TMDLs with past or imminent compliance deadline dates. Because a final deadline in a TMDL can only be changed through a basin plan amendment, we must incorporate these final waste load allocations and their compliance deadlines into the small MS4 permit. As I presented in the previous slide, the proposed amendment set out a series of implementation actions for the permittees to come into compliance with the waste load allocation. And the implementation actions have deadlines that are several months out or even years out. The proposed fact sheet states that it is the intention of the water boards to not take enforcement actions for noncompliance with the final waste load allocation deadline if a permittee is in compliance with the TMDL's specified implementation actions in Attachment G. However, while the water boards have discretion as to their enforcement actions, we cannot give the affected permittees complete assurance that they are sheltered from a third-party lawsuit. Citizen suits could, at least theoretically, be brought for not meeting the waste load allocation by that deadline, by the specified deadline date. The proposed amendment encourages permittees to ask for a time schedule order if they want greater certainty and transparency as to the water board's expectations. But a time schedule order is not a complete shield to a third-party lawsuit. We have had staff turnover, but my technical staff, Bill Harris, who's sitting here, is the author of the proposed amendment and has taken over where the staff was replaced previously. Bill spent years soliciting regional board staff on review of 73 TMDLs and development of the implementation requirements. Bill even reviewed the regional board's 73 TMDLs and revised the proposed region-specific requirements for consistency statewide. In 2015, a preliminary draft of Attachment G, which I stated has the TMD specific action requirements, was released to permittees named in 65 of the 73 TMDLs. In response to that draft, in August 2015, 3 workshops with permittee entities and regional board staff were held at the Central Coast, the Central Valley, and the Santa Ana regional water boards, and state board staff facilitated those workshops. This past June, I contacted the newly named parties to ensure that they were aware of the recently released public notice and of this board hearing. I also informed the permittees of the past and imminent compliance deadlines and the potential of citizen suits for not meeting the waste load allocation by that compliance deadline date. I informed them that they could also ask for a time schedule order and offered our counsel to speak to their legal counsel further on this matter if they so wished. I also answered or sought any questions that came up during those conversations with the permittees. The public notice was issued on June 5th, and the documents are available on our website to the public. I've provided my contact information, my technical staff's contact information, and the applicable regional board contact information to these permittees. So this completes our introduction to you. Do you have any questions of staff before our interested parties present their statements?
Thank you very much, Ms. Pereira and Mr. Harris, for all of that research that went into this. Do we have any questions from board members on the staff presentation?
When you had those discussions with the stakeholders, was there any common concern or questions that they raised amongst them?
It varied, and yes, there was concerns. I made the mistake originally making the assumption that I didn't think the requirements were onerous, and somebody quickly corrected me, and was rightly so, telling me that to them it is, and they explained why. I didn't continue that comment any longer and understood from their point of view. Most were not too concerned, but some were not concerned about the deadline date and said they'd let it play out. Others were a little bit concerned, so it varied all over. There was just a lot of questions about the permit, and it was very helpful to have those discussions with them too.
Great, thank you.
Real quickly, as I went through attachment G, which there's a lot of detail, there were a couple of patterns that I was curious about, if you wouldn't mind explaining. There are public entities in the institutional category that are being added, but I would presume the private entities that are on an institutional scale, like private universities, are covered under other existing permits besides phase 2. To be able to cover their stormwater discharge that in an area affected by a TMDL. So
there are all sorts of nuances in that answer.
Yeah.
And I won't try and answer all of them, but remember that the small MS4 is for small communities, municipalities, and for those special districts or entities of the state. They're not for private institutions, which are not covered under the municipal stormwater. There are requirements for those institutions under the industrial permit for their industrial portions, but we do not cover commercial entities under our stormwater program. Is there anything that you would like to add, Amel?
Yeah, and then my example would be, why is UCLA covered but not USC?
Yeah, and the difference there is that one's a public institution, the other's a private institution. And I think, as John said, to the extent USC has industrial sites or any construction, those would be covered under those stormwater permits, but would not be under this permit.
Right. Yeah, it's just one of those things that comes out. And then along these lines, as far as the named entities, one thing that jumped out at me was in Central Valley Regional Board, they've designated census-designated places, which are unincorporated cities or towns within county jurisdiction. But I don't think I saw that in the other regional boards. And is there a legal entity there that we really can name in a permit outside of the county? Thank you.
In cases where the county is named in the permit, it's actually the county that carries out the requirements. So we have language in the permit itself, I believe, that says that. So this was something we also noticed after it went out for public comment, and I'll let Gayleen answer, but I believe we've had conversations with Region 5, and they intend to take those off the TMDL list.
Mel is exactly correct. We've had the meetings with Region 5, and we will be removing those census-designated places.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer. And as folks can see, this is a draft order, and we'll continue to take comment. In fact, for a couple more weeks, I think, correct? Till July 20th?
July 20th, yes.
Very good. Any other questions for staff? Very good. I only have one speaker card. Is this really true? It's true from here. So we appreciate you coming and listening, and to everyone on the web listening to the presentation. I would ask Travis Pritchard of the California Coastkeeper Alliance to please approach the podium. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Chair Marcus and board members. My name is Travis Pritchard, and I'm here on behalf of the California Coastkeeper Alliance, which unites locally based waterkeepers organizations to fight for swimmable, drinkable, and fishable waters in California communities and ecosystems. CCKA and our network of California waterkeepers have been actively involved in ensuring the control of stormwater pollution for 20 years. Many of our groups have reviewed, inspected, negotiated BMPs, and monitored discharges since the original stormwater permits, and have worked closely with the State Water Board and regional boards to develop, adopt, and implement permits that improve California's water quality. The Clean Water Act's TMDL program represents the Act's safety net. It is the bedrock component of the Clean Water Act and the backstop to ensure that the goals of the Act can be achieved when initial efforts fail. Our primary concern with the Phase 2 TMDL requirements is the TMDL implementation schedules for pollutants regulated under the California Toxics Rule. Any TMDL implementation schedules for CTR pollutants that extend compliance beyond the CTR compliance schedule sunset provisions is illegal. Similarly, any permit that extends existing compliance deadlines for other pollutants based on a TMDL implementation schedule would be illegal backsliding. For example, the Santa Maria River Watershed Toxicity and Pesticides TMDL states that target date to achieve TMDLs for organochloride pesticides is 30 years after the approval of the TMDL by the Office of Administrative Law. Regardless of the TMDL's implementation schedules, permittees are required to meet the standards set out in the California Toxics Rule. As proposed, the TMDL adjustments will illegally contain TMDL implementation schedules for CTR pollutants that extend compliance beyond the CTR compliance schedule sunset provisions. Therefore, we request that the draft amendment require immediate compliance with effluent limitations set forth in the California Toxics Rule and remove any compliance deadlines that extend beyond that allowed under the rule. Our second concern is we cannot discern what TMDL specific monitoring requirements are required for Region 9's 20 beaches and creeks bacteria TMDL. Attachment G states that by 3 months from the adoption date, monitor discharges from their facilities, including MS4 discharge locations, to demonstrate progress towards compliance with final waste load allocations. The monitoring and assessment results must be submitted as part of the annual reports required under Section E16 of the order. And the language doesn't get any more specific. It just says monitoring. So what's the frequency? What's the methods? Also, Section E only applies to traditional small MS4s. It doesn't apply to non-traditional small MS4s. So while Attachment G lists non-traditional MS4s, including the fairgrounds, it references Section E, which doesn't apply to them. Do traditional and non-traditional have to monitor? And this is a statewide oversight in Attachment G that should be addressed. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that review, of the specifics, which is what we're asking for all parties to give a hard look at what we're requiring and any kind of potential inconsistencies. So staff want to comment, or any other board members?
With regard to the legal issues, I won't give a complete answer now, except to say that those are also issues in the current litigation that we have on the LA MS4 permit. So we disagree with the legal position, and that's playing out in the litigation.
So that was going to be my question. Are the issues that Mr. Pritchard raised things that carry over from the TMDLs because the TMDLs are implemented in this or unique to this?
I think the issues broadly apply to implementation of TMDLs in all of our MS4 permits in particular, both in the Phase 1 permits that the regional boards issue and the Phase 2 permit that the state board is issuing. They're not unique to TMDLs. Obviously, anti-degradation and anti-backsliding comes up in multiple contexts. But in general, it is in the context of the litigation we currently have on the LA MS4 order, it is a TMDL and municipal stormwater issue there.
And then the one about the beaches in Region 9 would be an issue raised on the TMDL itself?
Yes, and I think unless we have an answer now, that's something we will take a look at.
No, I want to follow up on this
Go?
and all the stuff folks raise in the written comments, obviously. So just flagging it now.
I might be able to add just a little bit more on the issue of the California Toxics Rule implementation schedule. Essentially, when US EPA adopted the California Toxics Rule, they did include a deadline by which the rule had to be implemented. The short answer is that our view is that deadline was a general deadline for the California Toxic Rule constituents, but each one of the TMDLs that was then subsequently adopted and approved by EPA had deadlines that were in many cases substantially later than the federal regulation. And so we're taking great pains, you'll see, and you heard from part of the staff presentation, to really hew to the final deadlines that were in each of the TMDLs. And so whether they're California Toxics Rule constituents or other constituents, those final deadlines were adopted through a rulemaking specific to that watershed and that pollutant. And those are the final deadlines that we're making sure that both this MS4 permit and all of our other permits are, in fact, implementing.
Okay, that's helpful. Well, but we'll look forward, we'll go over everything. Thank you for flagging the issues.
Oh, good. Any other comments or discussion? Oh, well, thank you for this follow-up to the Phase 2 issuance a couple of years ago. It's been very careful and getting the stakeholders involved. And we look forward to the written comments on July 20th on this item and continue to work on that. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next item. Thank you, staff. This would be item 7, the board member report. And would any of my fellow board members have a report to give this morning? Because I have to check to see what I did. So
yeah, I'll start off.
Board Member Escobar, thanks.
Early last week, I spent Monday touring North Bay Reuse Water Association's various projects. Went and looked at the salt pond restoration, salt marsh restoration that's going on, and it was nice. It was. I had been tracking these projects when I was in Senator Boxer's office. They would come through, and we talk about what federal programs can help. But it's worth noting how different water management is certainly in the Sonoma County area, and in general in North Bay, as opposed to say in Southern California, where they're more looking for regional storage projects, smaller storage projects to take recycled water and then park it and be able to use it within the watershed in a really smart way. So it was a really nice day. And then on Tuesday, continued my sort of tour of the area, if you will, but this time through the Western States Water Council, where Janine Jones is the state's appointee on the council. And the Western States Water Council was actually born out of the late 70s drought. The Western Governors Association put together the council to try to bring the Western states together to really push on the federal government on drought management, water management issues. So it's a fantastic institution, and it was a really great tour that Janine and Tony Willardson, the executive director of the council, put together. So I was fortunate to go on that and to be surrounded by other Western states representatives, water representatives. So, finding the commonality and the management of water in the Sonoma County area with those, so forecast-informed reservoir operations, salmon recovery and, functioning under a biological opinion. All these lessons were really brought forward in being able to actually see the project. So you get such a different feel for it. So I was fortunate to do that. And then later in the week was actually on Thursday, did a quick tour of the Salton Sea, got on an airboat. So it had been the first time that I actually was on the sea. Usually you're kind of touring the fringes, kind of looking at the wetlands sort of work, but being on the sea really does give you such a different perspective. And one, to the amount of playa that is already exposed. At this point, the sea has dropped about 5 feet in the last decade plus. And so, but the resiliency of the wildlife out there was really amazing insofar as, here you have this shoreline that's sort of changing and shifting in places, what was once sort of a rock out in the middle of the sea, or not in the middle, but surrounded by water, where birds would nest is now accessible by predators, so they no longer use that. But just the various wetlands that have sort of sprouted out of themselves from the drainage water on the southern side, you can kind of see where we as a state are heading insofar as the management of that playa, getting those wetlands in, and really the response from wildlife is pretty incredible. The following day then was the regional board meeting, and was glad to attend that. But then we did a quick trip down to Calexico to look at the New River and really look at those transboundary water issues that the communities out there face because of the flow of water going actually north from Mexicali and across the border, and the challenges and the successes, some successes as well down there of addressing those issues. And it's really important for the communities. So it was a filled week. I know it was being up in Sonoma and then all the way down to the border. You're really given an appreciation for the diversity of the state, and the challenges that each community faces in its own right. So, yeah.
No, thank you for that report, especially on the Salton Sea trip. I think both the vice chair and I requested rain checks on that one, so we'll look forward to doing that.
Yeah, the winter is a little kinder time to go. Winter or fall, we can set something up in a few months.
You're a brave man. Nothing much for me to report. We've been in water fix hearings, and with hopefully some luck, we should be able to wrap up part 1 next week.
Well, that's great. Thanks. Great to hear the report, Board Member Esquivel. Also, just the opportunity to share experience with other states must have been really, and for them to see the Russian River and the issues there. That's great. Well, a couple of things I'll note. On June 22nd, I was asked to participate in a panel led by Nusha Ajami, our colleague at the regional board in San Francisco Bay, also Stanford Water in the West, to discuss financing of public works projects. And there was also folks there from, it was a great opportunity actually to meet with and speak with Tavia Barnes of the iBank, who, you know, I'm pleased to let you all know really strongly values our partnership with them. The iBank really, they were, in their comments, were very supportive of our efforts at the State Water Board and our Division of Financial Assistance as a partner, a strong partner, and encouraging our continued path to, as we heard recently in the IUP update last month, to come up with a good strategy for debt management, but take it seriously and move in that direction to spur economic growth in our state and also improve water quality and reliability of our infrastructure. So that was special to share with those folks, and also Fred Silva of California Forward, a really good voice for supporting watershed management themes in the redevelopment of our urban areas, and taking where redevelopment left off and using other tools such as enhanced infrastructure financing districts, which are still under consideration in different forums in our state, but our neighbors here in West Sacramento are implementing one, as well as Otay, Mesa, and San Diego. And so they're starting to form as entities, multiple jurisdictions dealing with shared regional infrastructure challenges. And we always like to say water, wastewater, stormwater is a great place to start for redeveloping communities for prosperity and improved quality of life and environmental quality. And then last week on June 29th, Greg Gearhart of OEMA asked me to kick off the second annual Watershed Health Indicators and Data Science Symposium held by our Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program. And it was very well attended in the Byron Chair Auditorium. It was a 2-day seminar with very excellent data science and environmental, ambient science presentations and back and forth and discussion with folks. And there were vendors in the hallway outside here describing different information technology innovations, and a chance to have some hands-on experience with emerging data collection, data storage, data management, and data visualization tools. And it was a pleasure to give our thumbs up, not only from our board, because we're all very interested in data-driven decisions. I said I don't always speak for my board, just for myself, but I'm pretty confident that we support data-driven decisions. In fact, at the Water Quality Coordinating Committee, we're going to have, on October 26th, an item about using technology to monitor compliance, engaging the regional board members and regional board staff in that discussion. How can we enhance our credibility, effectiveness, build trust, and build a team with local entities to improve the environment and in a very transparent way, but using technology to really enhance our capabilities, since often we may have hundreds of enrollees in a program and only 1 or 2 staff to manage it. So that's kind of on the data collection side of that data management organization that OEMA is really spearheading for our agency, working with the regional boards. So it's an exciting area, and it was a privilege to be the spokesperson for this board, kicking off that second annual event, and I'm sure there'll be many more to come. Oh yes, and Felicia, could you wrap up the board member report?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I forgot because it was a vacation, not on work time, but this shows you how warped I am and what I want to do on my vacation time. I spoke on a panel at the One Water Summit, which I know Steve has spent some time with. I hope the other board members are familiar with this organization, and that's why I wanted to mention it at their annual. I was on the sort of, we were laughing and talking about us being the One Water Progressive Regulator Caucus, because they did everything in delegations and caucuses about, regulators who are trying to be partners, regulators, but be partners with communities who are trying to do the one water ethic between stormwater, wastewater, and drinking water. And I've been following the group since it started as sort of a sturdy band of largely wastewater entities out to change the world. And it's been amazing to see it grow. There were over 600 water professionals from all walks, so a lot more water suppliers than had been there at the beginning, and just I could only, because of what I thought our hearings were going to be, I could only go for the last day, but they had 3 days of amazingly inspired stories, and then the last plenary was 25 report outs of commitments and things that different delegations had done. And I just want to mention it because they bounce back and forth across the country, and it would be good to have all of us be able to do a stop at whatever their next West Coast conference is, which is easier to get to, but really, really inspiring about the acceleration of this movement of thinking about every drop of water as something precious and something that can also rejuvenate urban livability as well as rural. So a really fine collection of water professionals to be around.
Yeah, it's
Great.
been...
Yeah, no, the One Water group, and it seems like a lot of the cities, they got One Water LA, One Water SF, and San Diego has a version of it, and it is inspiring. And it was at the U.S. Water Alliance. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I loved your description of it, a sturdy band, no question. And it's really catching on, and it's not just California; it's nationwide.
Yeah, it was absolutely nationwide.
Yeah,
no, it's been incredible to see all that work being done, and you can always liken it to the energy sector insofar as once the sector really started to change how they viewed the resource, how you produce it, how you distribute it, how it's used in economies and society, it just kind of takes off, and it's been amazing to see that in the water space where it hadn't really and it is taking hold right now. Everyone is having, the drought has focused everyone on policies that better manage throughout the watershed for multiple needs, and it's really about how do you be a 21st century regulator, right? What does a regulatory body look like in the 21st century? And it is that collaborative approach. It's being sophisticated and understanding how we do that work. So being new to this side of things, it's exciting.
Yeah, and we're evolving, whether it's a stormwater strategy, the recycle water regulatory instruments and financing instruments that we've used. We're trying to, and to staff from the board, we're trying to set up incentives for this kind of holistic thinking at the regional and local level. And I think staff has been very inspiring in bringing that forward. And so it's the right movement to be a part of. Well, with that, am I still in charge?
Yeah, do we have executive director's report?
No, not today.
So, yes, do we have a closed session today?
There are two closed sessions listed on the agenda. My understanding is the board will not be meeting in closed session on either of those items or any other items today.
Okay, well, with that, the meeting is
Thank you for chairing the meeting. I appreciate it. I thought it was going to be much longer set of hearings. I was trying to get down for perchlorate too, but I just couldn't quite make
And
it.
Board Member Diadamo was going to come, but it ended up being kind of a short board meeting. So.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, yep, no, that's it. Thanks.